The room was filled with the low murmur of voices, as the rich and powerful mingled under the soft, dim lights of the grand ballroom. Laughter echoed, and the clinking of glasses broke the monotony of idle conversations. At the far corner, dressed in a simple gray uniform, Maya Williams pushed a cart filled with empty glasses and silver platters. She had been cleaning up after this extravagant gala for hours, but she had seen it all before. The wealth, the arrogance, the assumption that people like her, people from her background, were invisible. She had learned long ago that no matter how hard she worked, how dedicated she was, she would always be the help, the maid, the janitor, the one who cleans up after the rich. Her gaze shifted across the room to the man standing at the center of the crowd, Richard Harris, a billionaire tech mogul. His smile was wide, his laughter hearty as he entertained a group of investors with tales of his latest business success. His suit was tailored to perfection, his confidence practically oozing from him as he held court in the middle of the room. Maya had heard of him before. Of course, who hadn't? He was one of the wealthiest men in the country, a man whose empire spanned across industries, from tech to real estate. But Maya was no stranger to the arrogance that came with money, the belief that wealth gave you power over others. As she walked past him, pushing the cart down the hallway to the kitchen, she overheard a conversation that made her stop in her tracks. A group of his associates laughed as they joked about the help. "They're so easy to overlook," one of them said, his voice dripping with condescension. "They're invisible, don't you think?" Maya's hands clenched around the edge of the cart. Her stomach churned with anger, but she didn't show it. She couldn't afford to. She couldn't afford to make a scene, to stand up for herself. Not in a place like this, not with people like them. She forced herself to keep walking, her back straight, her head down, but the words lingered in her mind. "They're invisible, invisible." It was a word she had heard her whole life. She was used to it. But today, something inside her snapped. Maya could feel the anger rising, a fire that she had kept buried for so long. She knew she was just a janitor, just a maid in this world of glitz and glamour, but she also knew that sometimes, even the invisible had a story to tell. Maya stopped in front of the kitchen door, her heart pounding in her chest. She could hear the laughter behind her, the cruel jokes that were still echoing in her ears. For a moment, she considered going back to the kitchen, to hide behind the doors where it was safe. But then she thought about the people in that room, about the men and women who thought they could look down on her, who thought her worth was measured by the uniform she wore. She wasn't just a maid. She wasn't invisible. She was someone with a purpose, with a story of her own, and today, she would make sure they knew it. As the evening progressed, Maya tried to shake off the feeling of humiliation that lingered in the air. The laughter, the dismissive glances, the cold shoulders, they were nothing new. She had seen it all before, and yet it always stung, each time, like a fresh wound. She could feel the sting of the words, "They're invisible," echoing in her mind, cutting deeper than any physical insult ever could. Maya didn't belong here, she knew that, but in her heart, something else told her that she deserved more than being just another face in the crowd of underpaid staff. She wasn't invisible, not to herself. As she continued cleaning, moving between tables and guests, she couldn't help but watch Richard Harris. His laughter echoed across the room, mingling with the clink of glasses and the chatter of the elite. He was the kind of man who believed his money gave him power, and it showed in every word he spoke, every gesture he made. He was untouchable, and everyone knew it. But Maya saw him differently. Beneath the tailored suit, the air of invincibility, and the sharp business mind, she saw a man who was no different from anyone else. A man who, like everyone else, had his weaknesses. He just didn't know it yet. Maya could never have imagined that, just hours after hearing those cruel words, her life and his would take an unexpected turn. It happened when she entered the bathroom for a quick break. She stood in front of the mirror, taking a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She wasn't sure what she was doing anymore. Should she leave? Should she quit? But deep down, she knew she couldn't. Her family needed this job. The rent had to be paid. She had to swallow her pride and move on. As she stood there, lost in thought, the door to the bathroom suddenly opened. Richard Harris walked in, looking as confident as ever. But something in his eyes told her that something was wrong. His face was pale, his hands trembling slightly. He didn't even notice her at first, too caught up in whatever was going on inside his head. He walked to the sink, his eyes staring blankly at his reflection. Then, to Maya's surprise, he spoke, his voice tight with tension. "I'm going to lose everything," he muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. Maya hesitated for a moment, unsure if she should even speak. But then, she remembered the words that had been haunting her all night. "They're invisible." No, she wouldn't be invisible anymore. She had just as much right to be heard as anyone else in this room. Taking a deep breath, Maya stepped forward. "What's going on?" she asked gently, her voice steady. Richard didn't look at her, but the desperation in his voice was clear. "It's my company," he said, his voice low. "There's a clause in a contract that could ruin me. I don't know what to do. I'm stuck." Maya's eyes narrowed as she thought about his words. She didn't know much about business contracts, but she knew enough to recognize fear when she heard it. "Can I see the contract?" she asked, surprising even herself with her boldness. Richard turned to her, his gaze momentarily sharp, as though he was about to push her away. But then something shifted. Maybe it was the way she stood there, calm and unflinching, or maybe it was the desperation in his eyes. Without a word, he handed her the contract. She scanned it quickly, her fingers tracing over the text. She wasn't sure what she was looking for, but something about the legal jargon didn't sit right with her. As she read, she felt a growing sense of unease. There it was, an impossible clause, one that would leave his company liable for more than it could handle. A trap. Maya's heart raced. She didn't know what she was doing, but she had to do something. Without hesitation, she spoke. "You're right," she said. "This clause is a trap. If you sign this, you'll be setting yourself up for disaster." Richard's eyes widened in shock. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice trembling. "I know it sounds complicated, but this is a liability clause that's been buried in the fine print. If anything goes wrong, your company takes the fall. The other party walks away scotangent-free." Richard's face went ashen. "You're sure?" he asked. Maya nodded. "I'm sure." Richard stared at her for a long moment, disbelief etched on his face. And then, for the first time, he really looked at her. Not as a janitor, not as the invisible worker in the background, but as someone who had just saved him from a terrible mistake. "How do you know this?" he asked. Maya hesitated, but then spoke. "I used to work in corporate law, before this job." The words slipped out before she could stop them. Richard stared at her in disbelief. "You're a lawyer?" Maya nodded, the weight of her own secret pressing down on her. But now was not the time to explain. "You need to call your legal team and fix this before it's too late," she said firmly. Richard's eyes softened, a look of genuine gratitude replacing the fear that had consumed him moments before. "I don't know how to thank you," he said, his voice shaky. "You just did," Maya replied quietly, turning to leave the room. As she walked out, she couldn't help but smile. For the first time that night, she felt seen. She felt heard. The next day, the mood at Hightower Enterprises was heavy, the air tense with an unspoken question that hung over every meeting. Richard had not only listened to Maya's advice, but had acted on it. He called his legal team immediately after their conversation, halting the signing of the disastrous contract. The damage was averted, but the road to recovery was steep. He knew that, without the intervention of a janitor, he would have been doomed. Maya's words echoed in his mind as he stared out of his office window, the city skyline seeming almost distant now, a world that felt unreachable in that moment. She had saved him. It wasn't just the contract, it was the realization that someone like her, someone who was supposed to be invisible, had the power to change the course of his future. A knock on his door broke his train of thought. "Come in," he called, his voice hoarse from the late-night calls and constant pressure. The door opened, and to his surprise, it was Maya who entered, her hands clasped nervously in front of her. She stood still, waiting for him to acknowledge her presence. For a moment, the power dynamics that had once been so clear were flipped. She wasn't just the maid anymore. She wasn't invisible. She was someone who had just saved the day. "Maya, come in." "Please," Richard said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. She hesitated before taking a seat, her eyes not meeting his. "I wanted to thank you," Richard said quietly, looking at her. "If it weren't for you, I would have signed away everything." I owe you. I don't even know how to begin to repay you." Maya shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She had never been one for thanks, let alone the attention she was receiving now. "I was just doing what was right," she replied, her voice soft but firm. Richard smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes for the first time in a long while. "Well, doing what's right saved my business." He paused, running a hand through his hair as though trying to gather his thoughts. "But that's not why I wanted to talk to you. Maya, you're not just a janitor. You're not just the woman who cleans up after all of us. I've spent the last few hours thinking about what you did, and it's clear you have a lot more to offer than just cleaning floors." Maya blinked, surprised by his words. She wasn't used to being acknowledged like this, especially not by someone as important as Richard Harris. She had worked hard her whole life to stay invisible, to keep her head down and do her job, but now she was being seen, really seen. Richard leaned forward, his voice taking on a serious tone. "I don't know what you were doing before this, but I know you have potential. More than that, I know you have knowledge. You recognize something in that contract that I couldn't see. You saved my company. You saved me." Maya felt her heart race, her breath caught in her throat. She had always been afraid to show what she was capable of, afraid of stepping out of the shadows. But in that moment, as Richard sat there, looking at her with newfound respect, something inside her shifted. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. "I used to work in corporate law," Maya admitted, her voice shaky but clear. "Before I had to take this job, my mother was sick, and I had to care for her. I didn't have a choice." Richard looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Why didn't you say anything? You could have come to me with this." Maya looked away, her eyes focusing on the floor. "I didn't think it mattered. I'm just a janitor here. It's not like anyone would listen to me." Richard's gaze softened, and for the first time, Maya saw the man behind the billionaire, the man who was just as vulnerable as anyone else. "You were wrong. I should have listened to you from the start," he said, his voice low, "and I will listen now. I don't know what it's going to take to make things right, but I'm not going to let you go back to being just a janitor. You've proven you can do more than that. You've proven you're worth more than that." Maya's mind raced. She had never imagined something like this could happen. She had always felt like she was destined for nothing more than cleaning up after others, but now Richard was offering her a chance at something more. A chance at respect. A chance to be someone. "I don't know what to say," Maya said quietly, her heart pounding in her chest. Richard gave her a small smile. "You don't have to say anything right now, but I want you to know, if you're interested, there's a place for you here, in my company. You don't belong in the shadows, Maya. You belong in the light." Maya sat in stunned silence, the weight of his words sinking in. This wasn't just about a job offer, it was about everything she had always feared was out of her reach. A chance to change her life. A chance to stop being invisible. The following week, Maya found herself sitting across from Richard Harris in his office, a place she had never imagined she would be, let alone in a chair across from the billionaire himself. The weight of his offer still lingered in her mind. But now it was time to face the reality of what it meant. The office was luxurious, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The view was stunning, but all Maya could focus on was the polished desk between them, a symbol of everything she had never been able to reach. Richard was talking, but she barely heard him. She had always thought of herself as invisible, someone who didn't belong in spaces like this, someone who was meant to clean up after others, to be forgotten the moment the job was done. But now, Richard had pulled her out of the shadows. He had offered her a future that she had never dared to dream of. "Maya, I know this is a lot to process," Richard said, his voice steady, yet carrying the weight of his sincerity. "But I need you to understand that this isn't just about the business or the contract. It's about you, your potential. I've seen what you're capable of, and I won't let you go back to being invisible." Maya nodded, but she wasn't sure what to say. Part of her wanted to refuse, to tell him that this wasn't her world, that she would never fit in. But the other part of her, the part that had been silently yearning for more, for a life where she wasn't treated like a ghost, wanted to embrace it, to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could make something of herself. "I've always just done what I was told," Maya said, her voice quieter than usual. "I've never thought I could be anything more than what I am." Richard leaned forward slightly, his gaze unwavering. Maya, I don't want you to think of this as just a job. I'm offering you an opportunity to change your life, to become someone who can shape their future instead of just surviving in it. Maya felt a rush of emotions, fear, excitement, disbelief, all swirling inside her. She had spent so much of her life feeling small, feeling like the world had no room for her except in the corners, cleaning up after those who had power. And now, here she was, being offered a chance to take the center stage, but it was terrifying. She didn't know what she was supposed to do with this opportunity. Could she really do it? I don't know if I'm the right person for this, Maya said, looking down at her hands. I've never been part of this world. I don't have the experience. I'm just a janitor. Richard's smile softened, his voice gentle but firm. You're not just a janitor, Maya. You're someone with insight, someone who sees things that others miss. You helped me when no one else could, and that's the kind of person I want in my company. People who care, who see the truth, who aren't afraid to speak up. Maya's chest tightened. She had always been afraid of speaking up, afraid of challenging the status quo, afraid that if she did, she would be discarded just like she had been so many times before. But Richard's words were different. They made her feel like maybe, just maybe, she wasn't the problem. It was the world that needed to change. I don't know what this will look like, Maya said, her voice still unsure but stronger than before. But I'm willing to try. Richard's expression softened, and for the first time, Maya saw a glimpse of the man behind the suit, the man who had built an empire, but who also understood what it meant to struggle. That's all I ask, he said. You don't have to have all the answers right now. I'll be here to help guide you, but I need someone who isn't afraid to take a chance, who isn't afraid to fight for what's right, and I think you're that person. Maya swallowed hard, trying to process the magnitude of what was happening. She wasn't just stepping into a new job. She was stepping into a new life, a life where she could finally be seen, where she didn't have to hide in the background, where her voice could finally be heard. Richard stood up and walked around the desk, extending his hand to her. Welcome aboard, Maya. You've earned it. Maya stood, hesitating for a moment before taking his hand. The moment her fingers wrapped around his, she felt a surge of something, hope, perhaps, or maybe just the realization that this was her chance to change everything. She had never imagined a moment like this, never imagined that one act of bravery, one act of kindness, could open a door to a completely new world. But now, standing in this office, her future felt more uncertain and yet more exciting than ever before. Thank you, she said quietly, her heart racing with anticipation. Richard gave her a nod, his expression one of pride. The only thing I want you to remember, Maya, is this. You were never invisible. You just needed someone to see you. The days following Maya's decision to accept Richard's offer felt surreal. She spent most of her time at the office, familiarizing herself with the environment, trying to find her place in this new world. The transition wasn't easy. She was used to the humdrum routine of cleaning, maintaining, and being invisible. Now, she was surrounded by executives and professionals, people who spoke in technical terms she barely understood. It was intimidating. But every time doubt crept in, she reminded herself of how far she had come. The invisible woman in the background was now at the center of something bigger, something meaningful. It was hard, though, because the transition didn't come without its challenges. Her colleagues were polite, but distant. They didn't quite know what to make of her. They had known her only as the janitor, the woman who had cleaned their floors and made their coffee. And now, she was sitting at meetings with them, discussing strategy, offering insights that sometimes shocked them. But there were still whispers. There were still sideways glances. Maya noticed them all. One day, as she sat in a meeting, her hand instinctively reaching for a pen, she overheard one of her colleagues whispering to another, "I heard she was just a janitor." "You mean she's not qualified for this role?" came the response. Maya's heart sank. The old insecurities began to bubble up. She had worked so hard to earn this opportunity, to prove that she was more than just the person who cleaned up after everyone else. But despite the quiet whispers, she didn't let it show. She had made a promise to herself. She would not go back to being invisible. That evening, Richard invited her to dinner. It was a simple gesture, but it meant a lot to Maya. He had always been professional. but she could tell he was trying to make her feel welcomed, trying to help her navigate this new world she was stepping into. Over a quiet dinner in a modest restaurant downtown, Richard leaned across the table, his voice low. "Maya, I can see you're struggling. I know it's not easy. You've got to understand that people like you are rare. You're not just here because of your past. You're here because you have something unique to offer." Maya met his gaze, surprised by the sincerity in his eyes. She wasn't used to being seen for her potential, not in this way. "I know it's not easy. I know I don't have all the answers," she admitted, her voice a little shaky. "But I want to make it work. I don't want to go back to the shadows." Richard nodded, taking a sip of his drink before continuing. "You won't. You're not invisible, Maya. You never were. You just needed to believe in yourself." The weight of his words hit her hard. She had spent so many years hiding, afraid of being noticed, afraid of being rejected. But maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop hiding. The next day, Maya walked into the office with a renewed sense of purpose. She was no longer just trying to survive in the background. She was here to make a difference. That afternoon, she was invited to a high-stakes meeting, one that involved several top-level clients and important business decisions. Maya had always been terrified of these types of meetings, but today, something was different. As the discussion went on, she began to recognize patterns in the conversation, things that others seemed to overlook. A key detail in a contract that was being discussed caught her attention, an inconsistency that could affect the entire deal. Without thinking, she spoke up. "I think I see something that hasn't been addressed," she said, her voice calm but firm. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to her. She felt the weight of their gazes, but she didn't flinch. Richard glanced at her, his expression unreadable. Then he gave a slight nod. "Go ahead, Maya," he said. Maya took a deep breath, standing tall as she pointed out the discrepancy. It wasn't much, just a small detail, but it was enough to raise a red flag. As she spoke, she could see the surprise on everyone's face. They hadn't expected her to say anything, let alone contribute something so valuable. When the meeting ended, Richard walked over to her, a rare smile tugging at his lips. "You did well today, Maya," he said. "You're starting to find your voice." Maya felt a rush of relief, but there was something more: pride. For the first time, she felt like she had earned her place in this world. She wasn't just the invisible janitor. She wasn't just the one who cleaned up after others. She was someone who had a voice, someone whose opinion mattered. And that, more than anything, was what changed her life. Later that evening, as Maya walked home, the city lights felt brighter, the air fresher. She had taken her first steps out of the shadows, and she wasn't going back. The world was different now. She was different now. Weeks passed, and Maya found herself growing into the role Richard had given her. At first, the self-doubt was overwhelming. She had moments where she wanted to turn around and walk out of the office, back to the world where she knew her place. But each day, each small victory, made it harder to leave. She had stopped being invisible, and the world had started to notice. She had contributed to meetings, fixed mistakes others had missed, and made a real impact on the company. The whispers had died down. Her colleagues now looked at her differently, no longer as the janitor, but as someone who had earned her seat at the table. But just as she began to feel comfortable in her new life, a new challenge appeared. One afternoon, Richard called her into his office. She had been expecting this. After all, her role was new to both of them, and they were both still figuring out what her future in the company would look like. When she walked into his office, Richard was sitting behind his desk, papers scattered in front of him, his brow furrowed with concern. "Maya, we have a problem," he said, his voice unusually serious. "One of our key investors is threatening to pull out of the deal. If they do, it could collapse everything we've worked on for the last year." Maya's heart raced. She had seen the power that this investor held. Without them, the entire project could crumble. "What can I do?" she asked, her voice steady despite the panic she felt rising inside. Richard looked at her, his expression unreadable. "I need your help, Maya. This investor has been difficult to reach, and when we do get them on the phone, it's always a game of cat and mouse. They need something to convince them that this deal is still worth it, something personal. I want you to talk to them." Maya blinked, stunned. Me? Why me? She asked, confused. Because, Richard said, leaning forward, you're the one who understands the human side of business. You're the one who sees things in a way we don't. I know you can reach them. You've got something that we don't. Maya took a deep breath. This was beyond anything she had ever done before. She had always been behind the scenes, cleaning up the messes others made. But now, Richard was asking her to step into the spotlight, to take on something that could decide the future of the company. For a moment, she wanted to refuse, to tell him she wasn't ready. But then, she remembered how far she had come. She remembered how she had stepped into this role in the first place. She wasn't invisible anymore, and she wasn't going to let fear stop her now. I'll do it, Maya said, her voice filled with newfound determination. Richard smiled, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. I knew I could count on you, he said. The next day, Maya found herself sitting in a plush office across from the investor. The room was decorated with expensive art, the kind of space Maya had never imagined herself walking into. She was the only one in the room who wasn't wearing a suit, and she felt it. But she squared her shoulders and took a seat. The investor, a woman in her 50s with sharp features and a no-nonsense attitude, looked at Maya with curiosity. So, you're the one they've sent to try and fix this mess, she said, her tone dripping with skepticism. I'm not sure what you think you can do that they couldn't, but I'll hear you out. Maya swallowed, her nerves threatening to take over, but she pushed them aside. I understand that this deal is important to you, Maya said, her voice calm but firm. But I also understand that you're not just looking at numbers. You're looking at the bigger picture, the long-term impact, and I believe this project can still deliver that. But we need to make some adjustments, and I want to help make that happen. The investor raised an eyebrow. And what adjustments would those be? Maya hesitated, her mind racing as she tried to piece together everything Richard had told her. I can't promise that everything will go exactly as planned, but I can promise you that we're committed to making this work. We're working on the adjustments you've requested. And more than that, I think you'll see that the people behind this project are genuinely invested in its success. We're not just doing this for the money. We're doing this to make a real difference. For the first time, the investor seemed to soften. She leaned back in her chair, her eyes narrowing slightly as she considered Maya's words. And how do you know that? She asked, her voice quieter now. Maya looked her in the eye, not backing down. Because I'm one of those people. I'm invested in this. I'm not just some employee who's here to collect a paycheck. I care about what happens next. And I believe in what we're building. There was a long pause. The investor studied her, as if trying to determine if Maya was just another hopeful dreamer or someone who truly understood the stakes. Finally, she nodded. You're right, she said, her voice tinged with reluctant respect. Let's talk. Maya's heart pounded in her chest as she realized what had just happened. She had done it. She had convinced this powerful investor to give the deal another chance. She had faced her fears and proved that she was more than just a janitor. She was a force to be reckoned with. And for the first time, she truly believed that she could make a difference not just in her own life, but in the lives of everyone around her. The next few months were a whirlwind of change for Maya. She had gone from being the invisible janitor in a luxurious office building to a respected member of the team, making decisions, offering valuable input, and finally earning the respect she had always craved. The company was thriving, and so was she. Richard continued to support her every step of the way. But Maya knew it was her own determination that had carried her this far. But as things began to look up, a shadow still hung over her, her past. Despite all the success, there were moments when Maya found herself questioning if she truly belonged in this world. She had spent so many years cleaning up after others, trying to fit into a space that never felt like hers, that sometimes it felt like she was living someone else's life. She wasn't used to being seen for her intellect, for her contributions, rather than her uniform or her role as the cleaner. One afternoon, while walking through the lobby of the office building, Maya overheard a conversation between two executives. They were speaking in low tones, but it was impossible for her not to hear. I don't get it, one of them said. How did she even get this job? She was just a janitor. How does someone like her get to play in this league? Maya's heart sank, and for a moment, everything felt like it was collapsing around her. She had worked so hard to prove herself. to show that she had the skills, the knowledge, and the heart to make a difference. But hearing those words, hearing how easily others dismissed her, hurt more than anything. She didn't know how long she stood there, frozen, until she heard Richard's voice behind her. "Maya, are you okay?" His voice was filled with concern. She turned around, forcing a smile. "I'm fine," she lied. Richard studied her for a moment, his eyes narrowing as if trying to read her. "You don't seem fine." Maya's smile faded. "I overheard something," she said quietly. "People still don't believe I belong here. They still think of me as a janitor." Richard's expression hardened, and his jaw clenched. "That's ridiculous," he said. "You've earned your place here, Maya. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Your work speaks for itself." Maya shook her head, her voice barely above a whisper. "But it's not just about the work. It's about who they think I am. It's like no matter what I do, I'll always be that person in the background, the one who doesn't matter." Richard's eyes softened, and he took a step closer. "Maya, listen to me," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "You are not who they say you are. You are who you choose to be. You've shown me and everyone else your worth. You've shown us your brilliance. You're not just a janitor. You're someone who's changing the game. You don't have to prove anything to anyone anymore. You've already done that." Maya felt the tightness in her chest begin to loosen, but the weight of those words still lingered. I want to be seen for who I am," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. Richard smiled, the warmth in his eyes making her feel seen for the first time in a long while. "Maya, you are seen," he said, "and you always will be. You've earned your place in this company, and you've earned your place in this world. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." His words, so simple yet so powerful, hit Maya like a wave. She had spent so long trying to prove herself to others, trying to fit into a world that didn't understand her. But Richard was right. She didn't need anyone's validation anymore. She had already proven everything she needed to prove, not just to them, but to herself. As the days passed, Maya walked with a newfound confidence. She stopped doubting her place in the company and in the world. She knew now that she didn't need to prove anything. She had already done it. She had stepped out of the shadows, and no one could push her back. The whispers had stopped, and those who once doubted her now respected her. Maya knew there would still be challenges ahead, but she also knew that she was stronger than she had ever been. She wasn't just a janitor. She was someone who had changed the course of her own life, and no one could take that away from her. It had been a few months since Maya's breakthrough. She had found her place within the company, gaining the respect of her colleagues and proving that she was more than just a janitor. The work she did, the contributions she made, were no longer seen as insignificant. She had truly stepped out of the shadows, and her confidence grew with every challenge she overcame. But as she was becoming more settled, more established, an unexpected turn of events threatened to shatter everything she had worked for. It happened one Monday morning, when Richard called her into his office. She had just finished a meeting with the marketing team, feeling confident about a new project they were launching. When she walked into Richard's office, she was taken aback by his serious expression. "Maya, I need you to sit down," Richard said, his tone grave. There was a stack of papers on his desk, but his eyes were fixed on her, and for a moment, she could sense something was wrong. "What's going on?" Maya asked, her heart beginning to race. Richard sighed deeply, then leaned forward. "We've hit a snag. It's not good." He handed her a report, and as she skimmed through it, the words began to make sense. A major client, someone they had been working with for over a year, was threatening to back out of a contract. The terms of the agreement had changed suddenly, and Maya knew that if they lost this client, the company would suffer a significant blow. "How did this happen?" Maya asked, her mind working quickly. "There's a clause in the contract that wasn't clear to us at the time of signing," Richard explained. "They're using that ambiguity to pull out, and we're left scrambling." Maya's mind was already racing, analyzing the situation. She knew this wasn't the first time something like this had happened in the business world, but it still felt like a blow to everything they had built. Richard's voice broke her concentration. "I need you to go to the client, talk to them, see if you can find a way to salvage this. I'm not sure how much time we have." Maya's heart skipped a beat. She had been asked to fix issues before, but this was different. This wasn't just about fixing a small mistake. This was about saving a deal that could make or break the future of the company. "I'll do it," Maya said, the words coming out more confidently than she felt. Richard looked at her with a mix of admiration and trust. "I know you can handle it." Maya nodded, but as she left Richard's office, she felt the weight of his words sinking in. She had to fix this. She had to prove that she could not only survive in this world but thrive in it. A few hours later, she found herself sitting across from the client. The room was luxurious, and the investor was as sharp and calculating as always. She had seen him before, always calm, always in control. But today, there was a tension in the air. He didn't look at her with disdain, but he didn't look at her like an equal, either. "So, you're the one they sent to try and fix this?" the client asked, his voice cool. Maya took a deep breath, steadied herself, and nodded. "I'm here to help," she said, her voice unwavering. The client studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, let's see what you can do." Maya began to speak, carefully explaining the situation, pointing out the ambiguities in the contract, and suggesting possible solutions. She knew the stakes, and she wasn't about to back down now. As she spoke, she could feel the shift in the room. The client, who had been so dismissive of her at first, was starting to listen. She spoke with conviction, offering compromises that would benefit both parties, showing them that the long-term value of the contract far outweighed the short-term issues. It was risky, but Maya knew it was the only way to save the deal. After what seemed like an eternity, the client leaned back in his chair. "You make a strong case," he said, his tone no longer indifferent. "All right, we'll work with you on this." Maya exhaled in relief, but she didn't let herself celebrate just yet. She still had to tie up the loose ends. But the hard part was over. As she left the meeting, she could feel the weight lifting from her shoulders. She had done it. She had saved the deal. She had done something no one expected from her, least of all the people who still saw her as just a janitor. But she was more than that now. She was a force to be reckoned with. Richard called her into his office later that afternoon, his face lighting up as soon as she walked in. "You did it, Maya," he said, his voice full of pride. "You really did it." Maya smiled, the exhaustion of the day finally catching up with her. "I did," she said quietly. "But it wasn't just me. It was all of us." Richard nodded. "And that's why you're here. You're not just a part of the team anymore, Maya. You're one of us." Maya stood there for a moment, letting his words sink in. She had made it. She wasn't invisible anymore. She wasn't just the janitor. She was a vital part of the team, someone who could shape the future of the company. And that, more than anything, was the moment she realized how much she had changed not just in the eyes of others, but in her own eyes as well. The deal had been secured, and for the first time in a long while, Maya felt a sense of peace. She had faced the greatest challenge of her career, and she had come out on top. Her name was no longer just whispered in the hallways as the janitor. She was someone to be respected, someone whose opinion was valued, someone who had proved that even the most overlooked person could rise to the occasion and change the course of events. But as the weeks passed, something unexpected began to happen. Despite her success, Maya still found herself haunted by an unshakable feeling of doubt. She had been thrust into a new life, one she wasn't sure she was fully prepared for. There were moments when she looked at the polished glass walls of the building, the elegant suits of her colleagues, and the wealth that seemed to be everywhere, and she couldn't help but feel like she didn't truly belong. It wasn't the first time she had felt this way. She had felt it when she was cleaning the floors, when she was invisible. But now, as someone who was seen, someone who was heard, the pressure was different. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about thriving. And with that came expectations. Expectations she wasn't sure she could meet. One afternoon, Maya sat alone in the office, staring out of the window, lost in her thoughts. She had been working tirelessly, staying late to prepare reports, reviewing contracts, and taking on more responsibilities than she had ever imagined. She didn't mind the work. She was used to working hard, but the weight of it all was starting to feel overwhelming. Her mind wandered back to the people who had doubted her, the ones who still looked at her as nothing more than a janitor, no matter what she accomplished. She hadn't shared this doubt with anyone, not Richard, not her colleagues, but the burden of it was beginning to wear on her. The sound of the door opening pulled her from her thoughts. She turned around to see Richard walking in. His usual confident demeanor seemed a bit off today, and he paused when he saw her. "You look deep in thought," he said with a soft smile. Maya forced a smile in return, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. "Just thinking about the work," she said, trying to sound casual. "I've been putting in a lot of hours lately." Richard raised an eyebrow, his expression serious. "Maya, we need to talk." The tone of his voice made her stomach drop. She sat up straighter, her heart suddenly racing. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Richard walked over to her desk, sitting down across from her. His gaze softened as he spoke. "I know how hard you've been working, and I know the pressure you've been under, but you can't keep carrying this alone. I'm here for you, and I want you to know that you don't have to do everything by yourself." Maya's breath caught in her throat. She had always been used to handling things on her own, to carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders, but hearing Richard's words made her realize that she had been holding herself to an impossible standard. She didn't have to do it all alone. "I don't know what's wrong with me," Maya admitted, her voice shaky. "I've been working so hard, and I still feel like I don't belong here. I keep thinking that maybe I'm not cut out for this, that I'm not enough." Richard looked at her with understanding, his eyes filled with empathy. "Maya, you're more than enough. You've shown that to all of us. You've proven time and time again that you belong here, and that you have the skills and the heart to make a real difference. But the one thing I need you to understand is this. You don't have to prove yourself to anyone anymore. You've already done it. What I want for you is to give yourself the grace you deserve. You're allowed to take a step back, to breathe, and to know that you're doing enough." Maya blinked back the tears that threatened to spill. She had spent so long trying to prove her worth to everyone else that she had never stopped to consider how she felt about her own success. She had been so focused on the next challenge, the next step, that she hadn't taken the time to appreciate how far she had come. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. Richard smiled warmly at her, a small but reassuring smile. "You've earned it, Maya, but you have to let yourself see that too. No one can do it all, and you don't need to. You're enough just as you are." For the first time in months, Maya felt the weight of her doubts start to lift. She wasn't just a janitor. She wasn't just someone who had climbed her way up. She was someone who had earned her place through hard work, yes, but also through her heart, her integrity, and her ability to connect with others. The doubts still lingered, but now they didn't seem so powerful. She could hear Richard's words echoing in her mind, reminding her that she didn't need to prove herself anymore. It was time for her to believe it, to embrace the person she had become. Maya took a deep breath and smiled, feeling a sense of peace settle over her. The journey wasn't over, but she was finally starting to see herself for who she truly was, someone worthy, someone capable, someone who had already made her mark. The next few weeks felt like a dream for Maya, but in a way, they also felt surreal. She had accomplished things she never thought possible. The work she was doing was beginning to be noticed not only by her colleagues but also by Richard and the higher-ups. She had risen through the ranks faster than anyone could have predicted. The whispers of doubt that once followed her had quieted. Now, instead of being seen as the janitor who had somehow stumbled into this world, Maya was being recognized as a vital part of the team. Yet, as her success continued to unfold, Maya felt something else creeping in: loneliness. She had worked so hard to get here, but now that she had a seat at the table, she realized how much she missed the connections she had left behind. The friendships she had once dreamed of were now out of reach. She wasn't sure how to break through the invisible barriers that still separated her from the people she worked with. One evening, as Maya sat alone in the break room, staring at her computer screen, Richard came in, carrying a coffee cup. He smiled when he saw her. "You're still here?" he asked. Maya looked up, forcing a smile. "Just finishing up a few things," she said, though she felt the weight of her isolation. Richard sat down across from her, placing his coffee on the table. "You've been working non-stop. Don't you ever take a break?" Maya shrugged. "I just want to make sure everything's perfect." Richard's smile faded slightly as he leaned in. "Maya, I know how hard you work, but you're burning yourself out. You've earned your place here, but that doesn't mean you have to carry the entire company on your shoulders." Maya looked down at her hands, the words hitting harder than she expected. "I'm not sure where I fit in," she admitted, the vulnerability in her voice catching her off guard. "I thought I would be happy when I got here, but now, I don't know. I'm working harder than ever, but I feel like I'm still alone." Richard's expression softened, and for the first time, Maya saw him not just as her boss but as someone who understood what it felt like to struggle. "Maya, you don't have to do this alone," he said quietly. "You've proven yourself over and over again, but you don't need to carry the weight of the world by yourself. We're a team. I'm here for you, and so are the people around you." Maya felt a tear slip down her cheek, and she quickly wiped it away. It wasn't that she hadn't known this. She had always known that Richard cared about her. But hearing him say it out loud made her realize just how much she had been holding back. "I don't know how to ask for help," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "I've spent so much time trying to prove myself that I've forgotten how to just be human." Richard nodded in understanding. "It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to lean on others. You don't have to prove everything by yourself." His words settled over her like a warm blanket, offering her the comfort she had been craving. "I'm here, Maya," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "I've seen everything you've done, and I'm proud of you. You belong here, but you don't have to prove it every single day." Maya took a deep breath and let it out slowly. For the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of peace. She wasn't alone. She had been so focused on doing everything on her own, trying to live up to expectations, that she had forgotten how to let people in. She had forgotten how to be vulnerable. But as Richard's words sank in, she realized that she didn't have to do this by herself. She didn't have to hide behind the walls she had built. Slowly, Maya began to let her guard down. Over the next few days, she made an effort to connect with the people around her. She started sharing more of herself, letting others see her for who she truly was, not just the person who worked hard and carried the weight of the world, but the person who had dreams, fears, and insecurities just like everyone else. Richard continued to be her biggest supporter, but so did her colleagues. They saw her as more than just the woman who had been thrust into this role. They saw her as an equal, a friend, and a valued member of the team. Maya found herself laughing more, talking with others, and even sharing meals with colleagues she had once kept her distance from. As time went on, she realized that her success wasn't just about her achievements. It was about the relationships she had built, the people she had helped, and the way she had let herself be seen for who she truly was. Her journey wasn't just about proving herself to others. It was about proving to herself that she was worthy of love, support, and friendship. And as Maya stood on the balcony one evening, looking out over the city she had once dreamed of conquering, she knew that she had truly arrived, not just in her career, but in her life. She had learned that success wasn't about doing it alone. It was about allowing others to walk alongside you, to lift you up when you needed it most, and to share in the triumphs and struggles alike. Maya had found her place not just in the company, but in the world. It had been months since Maya had stepped into the life she now inhabited. She was no longer just a janitor. She was a leader, a vital part of the company. Her colleagues treated her as an equal, and the respect she once yearned for now surrounded her at every corner. But as she settled deeper into her success, a new challenge arose, one she hadn't prepared for. One Thursday afternoon, after a particularly long meeting with clients, Maya received an unexpected call. It was from her mother. Her mother's voice on the other end was shaky, filled with worry. "Maya, I'm not sure how to tell you this, but I need you to come home," her mother said, her tone full of concern. Maya's heart skipped a beat. "What's wrong, Mom? Is everything okay?" Her mother paused, and then the words came out. "Your uncle is in the hospital. It's serious, Maya. He might not make it." Maya's mind raced. Her uncle, the only family member who had ever really understood her growing up, was in critical condition. She hadn't expected this, hadn't prepared for the possibility that someone she loved could be taken from her so suddenly. As soon as the call ended, Maya found herself standing in the middle of her office, frozen in place. The weight of everything, the success, the job, the life she had built here suddenly felt like it had no meaning. Her family needed her, and she had to go. She had to be there, but the choice was excruciating. She had worked so hard to get where she was. Could she walk away from everything now, even for just a while? She grabbed her bag and rushed out of the office, making her way to the airport. She felt an overwhelming sense of guilt, unsure of what kind of message leaving would send to her colleagues or to Richard. But there was no time for hesitation. Family was family. The flight felt long, despite being just a few hours. Maya tried to focus, but all she could think about was her uncle's condition. She didn't know if she would make it in time. The moment she landed, she rushed to the hospital. Her mother was waiting for her in the waiting room, looking worn out and exhausted. Seeing her mom like this, Maya's heart ached. She had always been the strong one, the one who held everything together. Now, it was time for Maya to be the one to step up. She spent the next few days by her uncle's side, helping her mother navigate the endless hospital procedures, making decisions they weren't ready to make. Her uncle's condition remained critical, and Maya didn't know what the future held. The stress was suffocating, and the burden of uncertainty weighed heavily on her. But something else happened during this time. As she sat by her uncle's bedside, holding his hand, Maya realized just how much she had changed. She wasn't the woman who had been invisible anymore. She wasn't the person who simply took what life handed her. She was the person who was strong enough to leave her success behind and do what was right, to be there for the people she loved. This wasn't just a lesson in family, it was a lesson in herself. She had always believed that success meant pushing forward no matter the cost. But now, she understood that true success wasn't just about career advancement, it was about balance. It was about knowing when to stand up and fight for your dreams, and when to step back and fight for the people who mattered most. Maya stayed for several days, her mind torn between the life she had left behind in the city and the family she had returned to. The calls from the office continued to come in, but she couldn't bring herself to answer them. Richard had sent her a few texts, asking if she was okay and if she needed anything. Maya had sent a brief reply explaining the situation, but the guilt still lingered. Eventually, her uncle's condition stabilized, and the doctors gave them cautious optimism. He wasn't out of the woods, but there was hope. Maya knew it was time for her to return. She couldn't stay forever, and her company needed her. But when she got back to the office, things weren't as they had been. Maya had spent so long trying to prove herself, trying to hold it all together, that she had forgotten what it was like to be human. She wasn't invincible, and neither was the company. But the most important realization Maya had come to was this. Her true strength wasn't in her ability to work tirelessly, to stay late and do it all on her own. Her strength was in her ability to step away when needed, to ask for help when she couldn't do it all, and to never lose sight of the people who mattered. As she walked back into the office that Monday morning, she felt something different. It wasn't fear or uncertainty, but a quiet sense of peace. She had learned to trust herself, to trust that she was enough, whether she was at her desk or at her uncle's bedside. Richard met her as soon as she walked in. "Maya, we've missed you," he said, his voice warm with genuine concern. She smiled at him, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders. "I'm back," she said simply, and for the first time, she felt like she had everything she needed. Her life, her career, and the people she loved. She was no longer just surviving. She was living, and that was enough. As the weeks passed, Maya began to settle into her new rhythm. The tension and uncertainty that had once defined her were slowly replaced with a newfound confidence. She had learned to balance her personal life with the demands of her career, and she had proven to herself and everyone else that she was capable of achieving greatness. But just as things were looking up, Maya found herself faced with a new challenge, one that would test everything she had learned. It came unexpectedly, in the form of a business proposal that was presented to her by Richard. "Maya," Richard said, sitting across from her in his office, "I've been thinking about the future of the company. I think it's time we expand. There's a potential partnership with another firm, but it's risky. I want you to lead the negotiation on this. You've earned it." Maya's heart raced as she heard the words. She had never been given this level of responsibility before, and the weight of it was overwhelming. She had handled plenty of challenges in the past, but this was different. This was a major move, one that could affect the company's future for years to come. "I appreciate the trust, Richard," Maya said, her voice steady, though her mind was already racing. "But this is a big decision. Are you sure I'm the right person for this?" Richard leaned back in his chair, his eyes meeting hers. "Maya, you've already proven that you can handle pressure, that you can make tough decisions. You're ready for this. You have a vision for this company that I believe in. I have no doubt you'll do great." Maya nodded, but inside, doubt crept in. She had never been the one to take the lead in something like this, and the thought of negotiating with people who were far more experienced than she was made her nervous. But Richard's confidence in her gave her a sense of strength she hadn't felt before. This was her moment. She had come so far, and this was her chance to show that she was more than just someone who cleaned up after others. She was a leader. The days leading up to the negotiation were filled with long hours of research, strategy, and preparation. Maya studied everything she could about the other firm, their strengths, their weaknesses, their goals, and their past business deals. She wanted to be ready for anything. As the day of the negotiation approached, Maya's nerves grew. She had never felt such pressure before. But as she stood in front of the conference room door, ready to face the biggest challenge of her career, she reminded herself of everything she had overcome. She wasn't just a janitor. She wasn't just someone who had been overlooked. She was Maya, a force to be reckoned with. She took a deep breath and walked into the room. The other side was already there, their team seated at the table, all wearing suits and carrying an air of authority that Maya could feel even before she spoke. But as she took her seat at the head of the table, she straightened her back and looked around the room. She was no longer intimidated. These people didn't know her. They didn't know what she was capable of. But they would. The negotiations began, and at first, Maya felt like an outsider. The terms being discussed were complicated, and the language used was foreign to her. But Maya didn't back down. She listened carefully, asking questions when needed, and offered insights that surprised everyone in the room, including herself. As the hours went by, Maya's confidence grew. She had done her research. She understood the stakes, and she wasn't going to let this opportunity slip through her fingers. At one point, the conversation became tense. The other firm's representative, a man who had been quiet until then, leaned forward, challenging one of Maya's proposals. "I don't think this is realistic," he said, his voice sharp. Maya felt the pressure mounting, but she didn't falter. "With all due respect," she said, her voice calm but firm, "I think you're underestimating the potential here. If we're willing to adjust these terms, we could see a return on investment that exceeds expectations. I've looked at the numbers, and I believe this is the right path forward." For a moment, the room fell silent. The man stared at her, clearly taken aback by her confidence. But after a few seconds, he sat back in his chair, conceding the point. The rest of the negotiation went smoothly after that. Maya had proven herself, not just to the others in the room, but to herself as well. She had led with poise and authority, showing that she was more than capable of handling the pressure. By the time the meeting ended, both sides had reached a deal that was mutually beneficial. As the other team filed out of the room, Richard came up to Maya, a proud smile on his face. "You did it," he said. "I knew you would." Maya felt a rush of relief and accomplishment. She had done it. She had led the negotiation and secured the partnership. She had proven that she was more than just the janitor, more than just someone who cleaned up after others. She was a leader, and she had earned her place at the table. That night, as she walked home, Maya couldn't help but smile. She had finally found her place in the world not just as an employee, but as someone who had the power to shape the future. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, Maya was confident that she was ready for whatever came next. The days following the successful negotiation felt like a new chapter in Maya's life. It wasn't just the victory of securing a major partnership that made her feel different, it was the realization that she had truly transformed. She wasn't just playing the part of someone successful anymore. She was that person. The doubts, the fears that once haunted her, had been replaced by confidence, and with it came a deep sense of purpose. Richard had been right all along. She had earned her place. Maya spent the next few weeks leading initiatives, meeting with clients, and steering the company in directions she never thought possible. The respect she had gained wasn't just from her colleagues. It came from within herself. She no longer needed to prove her worth to anyone. She knew who she was and what she could do. But as Maya stood in the office one afternoon, reviewing financial projections for the next quarter, something unexpected happened. Richard walked in, looking more serious than usual. "Maya, I need to talk to you," he said, his tone cautious. Maya's heart skipped a beat. Had she done something wrong? Was there another challenge on the horizon? Of course, she replied, standing up from her desk. Richard motioned for her to sit. I've been thinking about your future with the company, he said, looking at her with an intensity that made her stomach tighten. You've done incredible work, Maya. You've proven yourself to everyone here. But it's time for the next step. I want you to take on a leadership role that will change the direction of the company. We're looking at expansion, new markets, and a complete restructure of how we approach things. I want you to lead that effort. Maya was silent for a moment, the weight of his words sinking in. Richard wasn't just offering her a promotion. He was offering her the chance to redefine the future of the company. It was an opportunity most people would only dream of, but it also came with a tremendous responsibility. I don't know if I'm ready for this, Maya said quietly, her voice betraying the uncertainty she felt. You've been ready since the moment you walked in here, Richard said, his voice firm. This isn't about whether you're ready. It's about whether you want to take the chance. You've already led the biggest deal in the company's history. You've proven that you're capable of so much more. This is your chance to shape something lasting, something that will have an impact for years to come. And I believe you're the person who can do it. Maya sat back in her chair, processing his words. She had always been the one to shy away from the spotlight, the one who hesitated to take risks. But here she was, with an opportunity that could change everything. She had spent her whole life feeling like she was in the background, like her potential was untapped. And now, the world was giving her a chance to step into the light. She thought about her journey, the challenges she had overcome, and the growth she had experienced. She had faced rejection, doubt, and fear, but she had never given up. She had fought for every inch of success, and now, the fight was no longer just about survival, it was about leadership. I'll do it, Maya said, her voice steady, the uncertainty now replaced with a quiet confidence. Richard smiled, clearly pleased. I knew you would. In the weeks that followed, Maya immersed herself in her new role. She led meetings, crafted new strategies, and shaped the direction of the company. The more she embraced her leadership position, the more she realized that she wasn't just managing a business, she was inspiring others to rise to their potential, just as she had. She had transformed from the invisible woman in the background to a force to be reckoned with. As the company expanded into new markets, Maya found herself surrounded by a team that was united, motivated, and ready to take on the challenges ahead. They saw in her not just a leader, but a vision of a company that could thrive through collaboration, innovation, and integrity. Maya had finally stepped into the role she had always deserved, not because she had been handed the opportunity, but because she had earned it. The journey had been long, filled with doubts, setbacks, and moments of fear, but every step had led her here, to this moment where she could look at herself in the mirror and say, I am exactly where I'm supposed to be. The company flourished under her leadership, and with each new challenge, Maya became stronger, more confident, and more certain of her place in the world. She had proven to herself, and to everyone around her, that she was capable of anything she set her mind to. As Maya stood in her office one evening, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance, she realized that the greatest achievement wasn't the deal she had secured or the leadership role she had taken on. It was the fact that she had finally believed in herself. She had stopped hiding, stopped doubting, and embraced the person she had always been meant to be. And with that, she knew that the best was yet to come. Discover the powerful journey of Maya, a woman who transforms from being an overlooked janitor to a respected leader in the corporate world, proving that no matter your background, you can rise above adversity. This compelling Black story highlights the struggles and triumphs of overcoming doubt, facing challenges head-on, and stepping into leadership. Maya's journey embodies the essence of what it means to fight for success, showing the strength and resilience required to succeed in a world that often tries to hold you back. As Maya navigates her career, she learns the importance of self-worth, the value of relationships, and the power of believing in herself. This Black story isn't just about professional success, it's a celebration of personal growth and breaking through societal barriers. Join Maya as she learns to trust in her abilities and unlock her potential, ultimately leading her company to new heights. This inspiring tale is a reminder that your past doesn't define your future, and no matter where you start, you have the power to create your own path. Let Maya's story encourage you to never stop believing in yourself and to keep striving for greatness. Maya's transformation is a testament to the power of perseverance, and it's a must-read for anyone looking for inspiration to conquer their own challenges. This Black story is more than just a career journey. It's a celebration of strength, courage, and the unyielding spirit that drives success.